This is South Africa. It's the 25th largest country by landmass, 23rd largest by population. Potentially one of the best places you could visit. But before coming here, there's some things you need to know. I've already pointed out the first thing, the country is massive. So don't come here expecting to see the whole country in one short visit. To get the best out of your trip, you're gonna need to do some planning. Unfortunately for you, Google search results could be rather uniform when it comes to South Africa. So watch this video till the end, that way you can get a unique perspective from a local, instead of just reading an article on South Africa that's just been regurgitated and doesn't add any real value to your efforts. So the second thing I'm going to tell you is that you need to expect that South Africa is going to be the America of Africa. What do I mean by that? We've had our own cowboy era, we've had our own pioneering era, we had our own gold and diamond rushes going on. We fought the British multiple times and given them some of their worst defeats in history. We have legacy race issues. We've gone through both world wars on the side of the Allies. We fought communism in the Cold War and even had our own NAM. Namibia. In this new light, it's really not hard to see South Africa as some random parallel universe alternative America. There is one major difference though. South Africa is positioned along the spice route, giving it decent food culture straight from the get-go. So that's my third point. When you come here, you need to get involved with the food culture. We pretty much came up with the perfect fusion dishes, blending European, Indian and Southeast Asian food, way before fusion was even a thing. While we're on the topic of food, food goes well with drink. You might know that South Africa's got the world's longest wine route, but what you wouldn't know is that South Africa produces other types of liquors too. When it comes to alcohol, South Africa is a powerhouse. Just this year, the Van Ryn's 20-year-old pot still brandy was awarded Best Wine Brandy at the World Brandy Awards. And then the wins just kept on piling on. Gold, silver, bronze, you name it. Agave used to make tequila is an invasive plant in South Africa. South Africa is the second largest producer of agave in the world. Just like champagne can only legally be produced in France, tequila can only legally be produced in Mexico. That doesn't mean we don't make it here. It just means we can't use a certain name for the trademarks of the product. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Due to the high demand of tequila, tequila is usually cut with cane sugar, diminishing its quality. So the South African version is going to end up famous for having a better quality and potentially being a more authentic product than the original. Then there's Mampoer. Mampoer's alcohol content per volume can range anything from 50% to 80%. It's basically a fruit liqueur moonshine, a deadly brew of fermented fruit that's probably more suitable for use as jet fuel or rocket propellant.
A new list of the strongest drinks in the world has been released, and we're on it.
Ja, South Africa's very own Mampoer made it onto the list.
Geen wonder nie, but it's much more gentle than people think.
What percentage alcohol is it?
This one's about 60. And I will be soon if I'm lucky.
Just take a second and listen to this.
Brannas het nog nooit my hart gebreek nie. Tequila my nog nooit in die rug gesteek nie. Bier het nog nooit my beste pel gevry. En Mampoer het my al hard gemoer. Maar nie so hard soos jy nie.
We also make a mean Dom Pedro, which is an alcoholic dessert thing you have to try. Before we move on from this food and drink category, I just want to talk about some dessert stuff too. This is called milk tart or milk tart. It's my absolute favorite South African dessert because it's not too sweet, it's just plain old comfort food. The Cook and Enjoy South Africa's best performing cookbook. If you pick it up, you can enjoy South African dishes at home. It was a self-published cookbook and it captures the essence of what South African food is meant to be. It's not one of those cookbooks that's trying to be overly fancy. Now I'm going to tell you about the most expensive part of your trip to South Africa. Not the flight, but the most expensive part when you actually arrive, the safari. South Africa's got more than a handful of national parks, and there's also privately owned game lodges and game reserves. The Kruger National Park is about the size of Wales or Israel. It's probably the most famous because of its size. These places tend to have 5-star accommodation, but you can also opt for self-catering, which would be significantly cheaper. I'd highly recommend getting a guide when doing these safaris, because their eyes are tuned into the bushveld, so they spot the animals easier and they are able to provide an education if you have any questions. So let's see here, number 3 was food, number 4 was drink, and number 5 is your safari. The 6th thing that you have to do when you're in South Africa is check out the cities. All the major cities are famous for something else, and they all have a nickname. It all started in Cape Town, so Cape Town's known as the mother city. It's basically the Rio of Africa. Think about it, you got your mountains and coastline, you got your crime, you got your tourists. It's Rio. There is a twist though. Cape Town's got its own little Alcatraz called Robben Island. Cape Town's regarded as the most European city in Africa. In the South African legal framework, a metropolitan area is regarded as a city with over 1 million residents. South Africa has at least 5 of these: Johannesburg, Pretoria, Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, and Durban. In Pretoria you can see the Voortrekker Monument. I've personally been here and it's my favorite monument in the country. It doubles as a museum that covers the history of the Anglo-Boer War as well as the Anglo-Zulu War, and it has a great view over the city. The Big O in Kimberley is the next best museum in the country. It's basically a theme park dedicated to the Bears and the Diamond Rush. So these 2 museums would be my number 7, but I'm not done talking about the cities. Port Elizabeth is known as the friendly city. They live up to the name. You can pretty much start a conversation with anyone in the city and they just carry on like it's normal and you've known each other for years. It's also known as the windy city. I think it's a quaint place. It's kind of a hidden gem. The most bizarre thing about Port Elizabeth is the weather. You can experience 4 seasons in a day. Not too long ago, Port Elizabeth suffered the name change. The locals are already ignoring the name change. People are still gonna call it PE because it's simple. But I don't know how the government expect tourists to find a place on a map they can't pronounce. It's on screen, go ahead, try reading it. You'll see how it turns out. Something like this.
The city of Port Elizabeth is now Gebedere. Maclear is now Gebedege. King Williamstown is now known as Zebedege, and Uitenhage Berberde.
The best advice I could give you if you want to experience the national parks is to get a wild card. The more places you intend to visit, the more cost effective this will be. Durban's the largest port city in South Africa. The city is known for its warm beaches, often referred to as the Golden Mile. The key attraction in Durban is the aquarium. It's known as Ushaka Marine World. It features Wet n Wild Africa's highest water slide. The aquarium specifically is called SeaWorld, and it's the largest aquarium in Africa. Not just South Africa, but Africa. So those are the 7 things you have to do as a part of your experience when visiting South Africa. Plan your journey, see the attractions, go on safari, try the liquor, try the food. Realize there's so much more out there, come back and do it all again.